Today, we are diving into an event that didn't just topple a king, it tore down an entire world, and it tried to build a brand new one from the ashes. We're talking about the French Revolution, a story of liberty, terror, and really the explosive birth of the modern age.
So picture the scene. It's July 14th, 1789, and Paris is an absolute powder keg. Rumors are flying that the king is about to turn his army on the people. And so, in response, a citizens' militia, we're talking nearly 7,000 people, they storm the Bastille. This wasn't just any prison. It was a medieval fortress, a powerful symbol of the king's oppressive rule.
I mean, an armed mob tearing down a royal fortress? That's a huge, explosive moment. But revolutions like this, they don't just happen overnight. They simmer, they build, they fester. So the real question we have to ask is, how did an entire nation get to this breaking point?
To really get the explosion, we first have to look at what came before it, the old regime. This was the social and political system that had ruled France for centuries, and let me tell you, by the late 1700s, it was cracking under the strain. This is the year it really all starts to unravel. A 20-year-old Louis XVI of the Bourbon dynasty takes the throne, and he inherits a kingdom already in a deep, deep crisis, with an empty treasury and a society just simmering with resentment.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer scale of the financial disaster. The French government wasn't just in debt, it was effectively bankrupt. Think about it. Long, expensive wars, the mind-boggling cost of the court at Versailles, and, this is a crucial one, funding the American Revolution against their old rival Britain. All of it pushed the state's debt to an astronomical 12 billion livres. I mean, it's a sum so vast it's almost impossible to calculate today, but it was more than the entire national income. The government was literally spending more on interest payments than on anything else.
And on top of this financial mess was a social structure that was just fundamentally broken. 18th century France was rigidly divided into three social classes or estates. And believe me, this division determined everything about your life.
First, you had the clergy, the leaders of the church. They owned huge amounts of land. They enjoyed enormous privilege. And the most important privilege of all, they paid virtually no taxes to the state.
Next up, we have the second state, the nobility. You know, the aristocrats and landowners. They held all the top jobs in the army and government, and just like the clergy, yep, you guessed it, they were also exempt from most taxes.
And finally, we get to the third estate. And this was, quite literally, everyone else. We're talking about 97% of the French population. From the poorest peasants and city workers to merchants, lawyers, and businessmen, the whole shebang.
And this chart just illustrates the core injustice so perfectly. The entire financial burden of running the country fell on this one group. The third estate had to pay a tithe to the church, a direct tax called the tile to the state, and a whole bunch of indirect taxes on basic stuff like salt. The privileged few paid nothing, while the vast majority paid for everything. It's just staggering.
So, you have this deeply unfair, completely bankrupt system. For centuries, people had kind of just accepted it. But now, something was changing. New ideas were in the air, questioning the very foundations of this old world. Ideas from Enlightenment thinkers like Jean-Jacques Rousseau were absolutely electric. This quote just captures the mood perfectly, doesn't it? The idea that a government should be based on a contract with the people, not on some divine right of kings, began to take hold. People were actually starting to imagine a different kind of society.
Desperate for money, King Louis did something that hadn't been done in 175 years. He called a meeting of the Estates General. This was an assembly representing all three estates, and his whole plan was to get them to approve new taxes. He thought this would solve his problems. Boy, was he wrong.
See, the old rules were rigged. Each estate got one vote, which meant the first and second estates could always team up and outvote the third. Recognizing they were being completely silenced, the representatives of the third estate made a totally radical move. They just declared themselves the National Assembly, the true voice of the nation, and swore an oath not to leave until they had written a constitution for France. This was a direct challenge to the king's authority. Game on.
This political defiance, well, it set the stage for the physical explosion we saw earlier. As the king and the assembly faced off, the people of Paris decided to take matters into their own hands, and the revolution turned from words to violent action.
I mean, just look at the speed of these events. It's breathtaking. In less than 3 months, France went from a desperate monarchy trying to raise taxes to a full-blown revolution. After the Bastille fell, the National Assembly moved fast, And on one incredible night, August 4th, they issued a decree that completely abolished the entire feudal system. Centuries of noble privileges and peasants' obligations, gone overnight.
And this revolution wasn't just a Paris thing, not at all. As news spread, a wave of panic and rebellion, known as the Great Fear, just swept across rural France. Peasants, terrified of retaliation from their lords, took up arms, attacked castles, and burned the documents that recorded all their old debts. So, with the old order literally burning in the countryside, the revolutionaries in Paris knew they had to do more than just tear things down. They had to build. This next phase was all about defining the principles of the new France they were trying to create. And you can see the change right here, plain as day. On the right, you've got the powdered wigs and silks of the old nobility. On the left, the ordinary revolutionaries known as the sans-culottes. And that red cap they're wearing, that's a Phrygian cap, the same kind worn by freed slaves in ancient Rome. It was a powerful symbol. They were no longer subjects of a king, they were citizens of a nation. But, and this is a big but, even as this new France was being built, there were deep, deep divisions. Radical voices like the journalist Jean-Paul Marat argued that the revolution hadn't gone nearly far enough. He believed that just replacing the aristocracy with a new wealthy elite wouldn't solve the problems of the poor and oppressed. This quote is frankly a chilling prediction of the more violent phase that was still to come. The revolution was far from over. It would descend into years of war, terror, and chaos, a phase we now call the Reign of Terror. But even through all that darkness, the core ideas it had unleashed, liberty, equality, the rights of citizens, they couldn't be contained. They began to echo all around the world. And yet the revolution's own ideals weren't always applied equally. The famous Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, well, it applied only to men. This prompted activists like Olympe de Gouges to write her own Declaration of the Rights of Women, demanding that the promise of the revolution be extended to all.
So this brings us to the crucial point. The legacy is incredibly complex. It's messy. The revolution, born from a rejection of monarchy, ultimately led to the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, who crowned himself emperor. He spread modern legal codes across Europe, sure, but he did it through conquest. The ideals of liberty inspired anti-colonial movements for centuries, yet it took until 1946 for women in France itself to finally get the right to vote. It is a story just packed with contradictions.
In the end, the French Revolution forces us to ask a really difficult question. It gave us the language of modern rights and democracy, no doubt about it. But it also showed that the birth of a new world is often a story of both incredible freedom and terrible violence. So it leaves us to wonder, what is the true price of a revolution?